Okay, we are going to talk about visions for the future. And now we've been talking about visions for the future all the time, but this is actually the phrase that we put on this panel. Christina, we saw your performance earlier on, and some of the performers are going to, or the audience are going to see it later. I've asked the three of you to present yourself in what you're doing at the moment, because, I mean, you've been working for a long time, Christina and Vera, running companies and so on. So I just wanted the three of you to present yourself, 5 minutes each. What are you at the moment? Christina, do you want to start?
My name is Kristin Bylund, and I'm currently a PhD researcher at the Umeå University in north of Sweden, and dealing with questions of family formations and relationships and lifelines for people with disabilities in the frail welfare state. And I think that maybe one of I really enjoyed this talk earlier on specific barriers for people with disability, because I think it's also tricky to look at the arts or the cultural sector as an isolated sector where we make art. It's with great risk sometimes for people with disabilities to dare to do these kinds of endeavors. And apart from that, I've been working almost 10 years now as a freelance performance artist, club promoter, and dancer, and I've been working in mixed media, so sometimes dance and sometimes video arts and so, and was last September in Glasgow at the Unlimited Festival and did some panels and some work with Claire Cunningham, who's been mentioned here, and Liz Carr, and so yeah. I don't think I need 5 minutes.
So hello, I'm Christina. Right now I'm just working like normal business as usual with several projects running parallel and intertwining. And with this project that is shown here, we're at the end of a 2 years working process, and we're gathering all the outcomes. So it's plenty of installation and publication, so there's much more to what you see on the stage. But also trying to keep it alive, that once we run out of this money, we have to try to make it continue. We're very fond of the work and we want to keep it. So at the same time, I'm working on a new production that will be a kind of reassessment of the idea of entertainment specifically of the format of the musical. So I'm working with seemingly differing projects, but to us, they are involved in them, and they're both run by one and the same almost obsessive desire to keep at looking at different and acting in a way between institutional and the non-institutional, and focusing on choreography as a possible asset, a practice, and a formation for a more emancipated world. So we have a strong political commitment, but we're also really focusing on choreography, movement, on art.
Hey. Spin is based in Gothenburg and wants to expand the art of dance, to be a role model, and to remind of everybody's right to express themselves through dance. Spin was born 7 years ago with inspiration from Kanjoko Dance Company. And as far as I know, we were the first inclusive dance company working professionally in the Nordic countries. We have support from the Swedish Arts Council, Gothenburg City, and Västra Götalandsregionen through a cultural strategy commission. Spin is doing the dancing and Producentbyrån is doing the administration. There are 6 dancers that aren't working full-time yet. My name is Vera Suvala Grimberg. And my job as the artistic director for Spin, it covers to find edgy choreographers, engaging composers, set designers, light designers. It covers finding accessible venues, do the selling and logistics. I also make sure that the Spin dancers get challenges and support so that they can continue to develop as artists. As you hear, it's a lot of work. And sometimes it's a struggle, but I really do love my work. We also give workshops, meet children and grown-ups, amateurs and professionals. We participate in many seminars and discussions. Over 30,000 people have experienced Spin since we started. We tour in Sweden, but even abroad. And I think Spin is considered as an expert within the disability sector in the performing arts in Sweden. And we don't mind that role as far as the arts come first. We are mentors for dancers, teachers and choreographers, and obviously inspire students as Emily Eriksson, write that down, from Gothenburg University. She just finished her thesis with starting points in the Creative Europe project that we have mentioned here, Moving Beyond Inclusion. We also have a good dialogue with the University of Dance and Circus. DOC is an important role model for other educations. They are now reflecting, developing and opening up. Yesterday, Anna Bergström told about our company for young dancers, Spin Unga, and the groups, the evening groups that we are running since last year. And she also told about the studio and office that are accessible, that are in the heart of Gothenburg by Järntorget. And this is, of course, a big step for us, and it needed some crowdfunding and stubbornness and volunteer work to make this move possible. And what's happening now, we just had premiere with Garden of Trees with a Finnish choreographer called Tanja Eloranta at Folkteatern in Gothenburg. And even this, being in an institution, was a big step for us. And yes, they bought our premiere. We didn't pay to be there, and that's important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then we come to the question: how does the programming in venues look like in 5 years? It's said in the program. We push it a little bit more, maybe 10 years or 15 years, but. We've heard a lot of hopeful voices here. I think we have had a very positive thinking conference. What are your thoughts? How does it look like in 10 years? Yeah, Christina can start.
Well, I hope that in 5 years we will not need to have such a conference, that the so-called disability dance or choreography will be recognized as constitutive to our common culture of arts, but also as our social common. I also hope that the myth and marketing of the figure of the choreographer versus the dancer versus the musician will be dismantled, because to me, and it is a fact, working with choreography is truly a collective work, and it remains as such also when it's presented within a market economy that requires categories or hierarchies. I hope those hierarchies are gone, or I will move somewhere else. And I also hope that with that, the normative formats in how work is being presented has been reassessed, reevaluated. To me, and I think for the type of choreography that is being practiced today, choreography is the work, the artistic work doesn't really fit only and solely in the performance format. And it doesn't need nor want to be categorized as performance or workshop or therapy or, all these categories. They're all intertwined and both a right, a human right, but also a responsibility. And with that also, is it possible to rethink the exchange economy between audiences and artists, and what is the actual the participatory is now being mentioned in all fora, but it's still based on a kind of a neoliberal market run description of the two categories. So I hope for that, and yeah.
Can we?
I don't know.
Christine,
That's a start.
Yeah. Christine, your crystal ball, how does it look like when you look into it?
I think in a broader sense, I would really want it to be secure right for disabled artists and choreographers and audiences to be able to access these kinds of spaces. And I think also in the weltering welfare state in Sweden, and lots of the reforms are under attack, it's for a lot of disabled artists or disabled people in general, it's not a practical thought to access dance. I think in that sense it can be really utopic to feel that you have the time or the self determination to choose to be a dancer, for example. I think that's still quite a limited area. And I think also it was really an interesting discussion here about the notion of disabled choreographers coming out of inclusive companies or having been disabled dancers, that I would want for a so-called disabled choreographer to choreograph in an able-bodied company, for example, because I think there's still this notion of a power relationship between different types of bodies, and I think it's really present in the performance art, where I think I wonder if nowadays the quote-unquote disabled choreographer is a choreographer only for the inclusive company, for example, and I would really want that. And I would like to see some resources, dedicated money for disability arts in Sweden from the Arts Council, for example, and these kinds of directed measures in order to open up this stage, because I feel like there is really a lot of great artists who could, like Sindri, for example, who we saw yesterday, and other artists and companies who are dedicated to doing work, but resources are needed. So I think it's this mixed method again of using certain structures, as for example in the UK, the unlimited festivals, and so to vehicle certain change that you would want to see, so that in the end it can be obsolete or power relationships can be altered.
In 5 years, the focus has changed from practical issues, and it's more about the development of the arts. So less talk about the toilets and more talk about the dance. So that was one thing. This is from the reality, yeah. And secondly, we have a dream list of choreographers, and it's like the top choreographers, and in 5 years they will be standing in a line wanting really desperately to work with us, because in 5 years they will realize that this is the thing. Because now they are actually saying no to us, and that won't be the thing in 5 years. Also, the dancers and all our team, including myself, we are going to get paid for our work, full-time, a reasonable level salary. I used to work as a dance teacher, and I actually earned a lot more money than I'm earning now. So it shouldn't be that way. So those were some things.
So I think there is a little bit of a disagreement here. I can see that because you spoke about taking down the hierarchy before, and now, Vera, you speak about, I think, about reaching maybe kind of status or a place by having those choreographers that you want to work with. Could you please, Christina, I saw that you did disagree a little bit with Vera's crystal ball vision.
So what do you want me to say?
Yeah, I don't know, but I saw your face.
No, well, that's the deal, As much as I keep telling myself and my surrounding that we ought to pay attention to difference, that's what the work is about. To pay attention, not create difference, but to pay attention to difference. Then when it actually emerges so bluntly, I'm kind of set back. I don't know how to deal with it. But we just have different, maybe we're in different processes, or we see we have different motives or different agenda, and that's fine, as long as we are not put in kind of a hierarchy, Yeah.
But isn't this a lot about that the worlds don't meet either? I mean, these fantastic people, we have no common network. And I think all the networks going on now, they will, in a couple of years, they will probably show the way and things will be more possible. So this with the dream list of choreographers, it's not that we necessarily only want to work with names, but it says something about the status of this kind of company. So why aren't we cool enough? It's sad, but sometimes I don't know if it has to do with the fact that we are inclusive or that we are a company that was only grounded 7 years ago. You have to do your trip. So, of course, there's the truth in that too.
No, I think I was thinking about what you were saying, Vera. The more discussions about for there to be a possibility to start a discussion about artistic quality, artistic visions, and those kinds of things, and to not be able to have the base level be, can we be in this space? What are the accessibility measures? Because nowadays that's super important to be able to secure those kinds of positions, because that's not what reality looks like. So you have to ask questions about the toilet in order to be able to do your work in the space. So I think maybe in the next sort of cycle, when we come back to the next exChange perspectives, hopefully, because I would want these kinds of spaces and these kinds of discussions. But I was happily surprised being at Unlimited in Glasgow in September, having a real sense of a discussion that was about hindrances, of course, and I was in a panel on visibility where there was real sort of heartfelt notions about what visibility can cost you as a disabled dancer. So if you are, for example, Claire Cunningham, and you are someone who, perhaps in a disability dance sense, but also in a majority sense, has some kind of reputation and success these days, it still can be the case that your council can take away your economical support. And that's highlighted, I think, that position by being put on stage. So if you are an extraordinary dancer, does it mean that you are less disabled in terms of being eligible for certain welfare services? So I think that was a discussion that and what does that do with your creative work? How can it inform creative work and work with other disabled artists? So I think that's a discussion that I'm looking forward to having as a disabled artist in Sweden. What are the intersectional points that inform our work? And I can have that in an inclusive or mixed setting, or I can have that in a sort of disableist, separatist setting as well. I think both are equally important in that sense.
I forgot to say that in that vision that I mentioned, that what I'm going for is that this focus should be on choreography, on choreography, in terms of an art practice that pays attention to difference, that speaks several languages at once, that disrupts normative syntax, etc., etc. All of these things, instead of sort of a distillation of experts or codified representation of beauty or ability, So that's the shift that would come at once,
Roberto was talking earlier about activism, or using the word activism. What are your thoughts about that? Do you feel that you are part of an activism era or time? Any one of you talk to each other.
I think these days when I am invited, I speak also on sort of the history of disability movement in Sweden as part of my PhD position. And I think I start by saying that it's not necessarily an interest for me. I think for me it's a necessity as a person with a disability in Sweden to have an activist notion of my work, and as a performer as well. Because I think I was in a position where when I started out as a performer, disability was not important to me. But it wasn't because I had the supporting structure that I needed to function in a non-disabled way in society. And I think when support and these kinds of basic structures in our life are challenged, that's when we realize that maybe I need to. And it is not necessarily the case that my art is political, but I think I have a notion of not necessarily creating sort of for my art to be in any kind of barricade in that sense, but there's an activist notion. I think I recognize that in a lot of what Roberto was talking about as well, this synergy effect of like what happens if we make an inclusive program for one marginalized group. Can it attract other marginalized groups? Can it attract people with refugee experiences, for example? And can we have these kind of fruitful conversations? So I think it's not necessarily a overt activist act to try and create these spaces and these artistic situations, but it has to, I think for me it's important to have an awareness that it can create activist effects, or it can create activist synergies. And I think in that sense representation has for me been really crucial, and I recognize this in discussions here earlier, this notion of like, what do we communicate as curators about the ability of our dancers for the so-called audience. And I think for me it's been comforting to see other disabled dancers, and I think and recognition in that sense of recognition in ways of movement, ways of using sort of appliances in certain sense that I recognize. But I'm not, I think as a disabled person, I'm not part of that in the general audience. So I think by communicating disability or deviance in that sense, you can also bring forward another type of audience, of course. I think I've been perhaps one of few disabled people in an audience where there's been a disabled dancer, and it's been a different kind of communication between different experiences, of course.
The word activist is so strong. I have always said that I have a mission, and I definitely have a passion for this. But yeah. And also maybe it was even stronger when we started, because I felt a bit alone. We were so even more unique that time. Now so much more is going on, so I kind of don't feel that I have to push this way. That I was really like a bit frustrated at the beginning, trying to communicate my vision of this. So yeah, and also this, you have, as an individual, you have different opinions, and just in spin we have different opinions. The people, the dancers, about what is this about, and it's not always easy. But as a company, we need to stand for something. But activists, we have to have a meeting about this, I think.
The activist question, yeah. I think that if you do commit to a certain, if you want ideology or view, you and work with arts in this manner that we're mentioning here, and I heard a lot of beautiful thoughts and in the morning. Yes, most certainly you are an activist, whether you want it or not. Question is whether that is even enough, whether, I don't know, I begin to think that we need to be much more subversive, We'll see. I don't know. I'm old. Somebody else will take over. But there's something that right now I feel is the minute you push forward 3 centimeters and discourse begins to deviate and some kind of opening, then it's immediately hijacked, marketed, and chewed and regurgitated, and I don't know really how to go about it. Yeah, but there is certainly a lot of activism going on in the arts that is maybe not considered as activism, but I think it is. Mm.
It sounds so negative, this with the word activist sometimes. Yeah. In my years, it does. I was just thinking that we, in spin, we try to love bomb instead. It sounds ridiculous, but it's like really, really believing in a change, but not doing it in a negative way. I mean, we can really think that such idiots or whatever, and it's not at all working. But we mostly have the same goal. Everybody wants that it's going to be more accessible, and people need to learn. The thing is, how do you communicate with each other, and how do you want to proceed the changes? So I think sometimes people the venues get really surprised. Well, aren't you mad about this, that it got so wrong? And I mean, it doesn't really help. It can be better next time. And
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Yeah.
Kristeva speaks or suggests the term energetic negativity. Yeah, if you want something else. But maybe we need disenchanted optimism. I don't know.
Can we touch a little bit about the audience and audience development? We've heard a little bit about thoughts on that, and once again, the surprising outcome from the Parkinson group that Roberto spoke about, that suddenly they grew and grew, and that was not the intention from the beginning, to grow in that sense that it did. Your visions about the audience, how do you look about the audience, what do you want from them in 5 years' time, say?
Whoever, grab the mic.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when we talk about the audience in these kinds of diversity settings, that the audience is sometimes our antagonist in some ways, that we have to convince the audience that this is good out, and how do we market this to the audience. And I think maybe that's been the case as well, to some extent, that a certain audience, and perhaps in institutionalized settings like here at Dansens Hus, is a certain kind of piece of society in that sense. But I think in the future I would like for a more diverse audience in that sense, but also a more diverse understanding of the audience from producers of different kinds of art, so that the audience is not just the able-bodied white middle-class person, but it can be someone else. And maybe that also has to do with inviting certain types of groups. And I think in that sense, about what is demanded from someone who comes into a dance space as well, or who comes into to be an audience in a performance space. That is it really an accessible space if you are not neurotypical, or if you have issues with sort of light and sound, or if you yourself make sounds in the audience, how do you deal with that? So I think that's also an accessibility question that we there's a certain normative scheme or way of being, of course, when you walk into a dance space, and I know that now I sit quiet and maybe I'm invited, or maybe I react in this way to this performance but not this way, and I think that's still pretty is a solid structure as well. So it's one thing to, and in that sense maybe it's the reverse, that in that sense it's trickier to be a person with a disability in the audience but easier to be one on stage maybe. So they're different. So maybe that's what I would like to see, a more fluid understanding of who's the audience member as well.
When we had our premiere and the following performances after Garden of Trees, again it struck me with the fact that the audience didn't want to leave. We actually had to throw them out at the end, and so there is this real need of a dialogue, and this is something we should really think about, how to take care of that dialogue, and how does it end there, and yeah, there is not really a proper plan for that. Maybe there is one for young audiences, because maybe the responsibility, it's a different deal somehow. So we mostly do performances for grown-ups, and I don't think we thought about that much as we should have done. And again, now we were playing for elderly people, and they wanted to have physical contact with the dancers, and that was a strong thing. And we should just not leave it there. Of course, without audience, there won't be anything. So yeah, there are so many areas.
Well, it has to do with the need to categorize and place, and also in a sense making two groups that are quite abstract, or that are part of this commodity-based exchange economy that I'm referring to. If we were to dare to change that, then the audience could be the actual ragbag of singularities that is equal to what's happening on stage, that it is. And also what I'm hoping for is also not to say the audience is good when it's a lot of audience. Audience is 3, 10, 20, 60, 200, 60,000. Each one person, a singularity, So I feel, especially in I don't know in Sweden, but in the field of dance, there's this anxiety of increasing audience. So when you speak of audience, it's the increase of audience. What if we just focus on the actual people that are here?
These people can feel when there is respect.
There's so much understanding there already, or desire to know one another. But it gets complicated of all these structures, measuring and naming and categorizing. And it's not necessary, I think.
I think we should now leave the words to the audience for questions, or if you want to say something, remarks and so on. This is the last panel for this conference. Do we have a mic somewhere here, or?
You can take one from there.
Okay.
So my name is Margita Lundman, and I represent the area of amateur theatre, senior theatre, and I have 3 very concrete wishes that I would like to see when we meet again in 5 years. And one is that a couple of years ago, the Dansens Hus arranged a performance by the Belgium, I think, group Peeping Tom, inviting amateur retired pensionists to take part and be part of the artists group. And so one wish is make that happen again. Opening up between the professional and the amateur, opening up between age groups. So that was once in a lifetime for us who took part in this, and I hope it will be at least twice in a lifetime. The other thing I wanted to send as a wish on the wish list is that Dansens Hus and other similar organizations would produce their newsletters into people's native language. And by that I mean, for example, sign language for deaf people. Many people, I think, do not realize that written language might be a problem for people who have sign language as their native language. But it might be, and I think it, as a start, maybe a trial with the video clips on sign language, which you integrate into your newsletter, that would facilitate, I think, enormously for people with sign language. So that is the second one. The third concrete wish is that I heard this morning that dancing in a wheelchair, when you have access to a sports wheelchair, might give you a completely different means of expression. So I wish for the wheelchair manufacturers and developers to start to think of dancing wheelchairs. What might that bring along? So.
That's great.
Try to be very fast. So, Elena from ITM. So, just quickly, if I'm staying a bit longer, so if people want to continue this conversation afterwards with me, I would be happy to tell you about ITM as an international network for contemporary performing arts. We are producing this publication that Ben was mentioning on focusing on art and disability. But actually, the main activity of ITM is to organize twice per year big gatherings with 500 to 700 participants each, in Europe, each time in a different city, in a different country, just for performing arts professionals across the whole spectrum, all kinds of performing arts. We are more and more actively committed to inclusion across ethnic and cultural backgrounds, across different abilities, and across gender and sexual orientations. But it's a long journey, and it's a huge challenge, especially in practical terms. So we are open, but we need also an exchange because we are learning ourselves. But the truth is that IIT meetings are huge opportunities for professional networking. And networking has been touched during these 2 days, but maybe not so much digged into. So if any of you want to continue this conversation. And the other thing, I don't know how the scene will be in 5 years, but I know that today the situation is extremely different in the different European countries. There are countries in which this conversation will never happen in these terms. Countries in which we're still struggling with terms, we are being entangled with labels, etc. And countries like the UK or Sweden, where this conversation is far, far away. So keep this in mind in your international work. And again, this is a conversation I would like to have. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Lene Bang, and I'm from Copenhagen, and I'm an agent, and I'm a producer, and have had the luck to work very closely with Skånes Dansteater. So that was a very important experience for me, and I can only encourage that Also from the producer's perspective, that producers are, in line with this kind of work, and they learn to think how to find possibilities. Because what we are talking about is a field of innovation, and that has to explode. But I'm also very afraid, because we live in political corrupt times where lies and ideas, and look at what happened in Sweden last night, things can change very fast. So I'm also a little bit worried, because here we are, a group of very committed, a lot of us women, which I also think is, one of my colleagues pointed out, is a little bit peculiar. We're just women, a lot of women sitting in this room having this discussion. I think that's talking about labeling, we have to look at what's the reality of who is actually taking decisions. So I hope there's a lot of decision makers here and use that decision. But I am concerned, because we are all struggling for little pots of money, and that's also a conversation with the ITM, which is extremely important. We have to be on the forefront with things, and we're not just we can't have this battle in these isolated black rooms. That is a stage where we have to. I'm just babbling. This conversation needs to go further. That's what I'm trying to say. So bring the good examples forward, and don't assume things. Ask the questions where they need to be asked. And then when it comes to ITM meetings, I would be a little bit worried about the facilities of where some of these ITM meetings are held. So if that's the actual wish for ITM, really make also a very clear guide on how things can be accessible, so it's welcoming. Yes, thank you.
I think here is the last question, and then we will wrap it up. Yeah.
Thank you for this great conference and this meeting of all these smart, nice, beautiful artists. It's always good to meet. And I wish if there will be papers out of this conference, and a plan to follow the Dance and Shoes and DOC and all the involved institutions, what they will achieve for the next 5 years as a goal, as you said in this conference. So I wish we follow this paperly, and maybe with a website or like hemsida, not so we can follow and continue. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to have a last word? Dear panel.
No, I really appreciated your point from Copenhagen. I think times are dire, and especially for disabled people in Europe. And I think the positive force and the resources and the want and ability to create change here can really be used proactively. So I think it's really nice that you mentioned also the sort of cultural context that surrounds us in Sweden and Denmark and globally. Yeah.
Yes, I was thinking about the politicians, that there are so few politicians that are interested in the questions of culture, and that scares me a bit. So we should make sure that those contacts are taken, and we can all take those contacts. So,
and we should all be very careful and not fall into the traps that politicians lay out carefully.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you, Vera, Christine.
Petra kommer också ner.
I want to thank you all for joining us during these 2 days. exChange Perspective will continue. Don't know really how when it comes to conferences, but certainly it will, Margita. Not in 5 years' time, but maybe in 2 years' time. As a label, exChange Perspectives continues at Dance and Shoes. concerning programming and also seminars and so on. We are also trying to, in many ways, to make this venue more accessible. It's an old venue built in the 60s, as you know. It's not an easy work, but we are really trying to push it in any way we can. Lucky you that are going to see the performance by Christina in a while. Lucky us that had the opportunity to do it at 10 o'clock. That's why we have to wrap it up now, so be able to go to the performance. I think it's been very enriching days. I'm so happy to be part of these conversations. And we're going to have, just for information, some of you might also attend the conference tomorrow that is arranged by Svensk Scenkonst, which is the employers organization. So it's a whole day talking about visions for dance and curating and programming and so on. And certainly I will have all the things that we have been discussing with me tomorrow as well. So thanks a lot.
And I also want to thank Dansens Hus that we are still in this, because I think this is also very important cooperation, that the professional, where the students go out and the educator cooperate. So it's really good that we're here together. And I was thinking of spreading this. Yes, I always do this, that I go home, tell at least 5, 6 of my friends and professionals where I've been and why weren't you there. It was so exciting. And also telling them what was exciting, because then they were feeling that, shit, I missed something. So I think we have our own responsibility to do this. So go out in your network, spread out, why weren't you there, and tell them to be wherever we meet next time. And then I also want to say that DOC is on the way. We have made some changes in our perspective. We are working on it, so please knock on our door, cooperate with us, come to us. We are supposed to be in dialogue with all of you, and us also telling you what is already going on. We had Kanduku Dance Company with a teacher training us, so there is a lot going on, even though we don't put it on the website all the time, because there's so much information. But please come. We are the place where you can hang out also, even if you don't believe it. So, and thank you for being here.
Okay, and I also want to say just something. I'm of course very happy that you are here from all over Europe and from Sweden. And it has been an exciting journey here in 2 years with this exchange perspectives. For 2 years ago, we were working more with norm creativity, and it was quite open, our conference. And now we was focusing more on venues and schools and how they could be more accessible. And what will it be maybe in 2 years? But I guess we also need feedback. So if you have any ideas or any feedback, we are very happy for that. So then you can just email me, and we will really try to, in some way, gather maybe, well, at least the films, so that we could send to you some information from this conference. You really gave us a challenging task, but we will discuss it. And if you have more specific ideas, please mail. So. Thank you very much. And now the people who will see imperfect choreographies should run there, I think. Thank you.